Steelers Nation, if you were anywhere near your phone, TV, or even just the faint sound of NFL notifications last night, you know exactly why the city of Pittsburgh is buzzing right now. It wasn't just another day on the calendar. It was the final day of the NFL trade deadline, and it turned into one of the most nerve-wracking, unpredictable, and downright cinematic evenings we've had in years. From the moment the sun came up over the Allegheny, there was a certain heaviness in the air. Not the kind that warns you of bad weather, but the kind that says something is brewing. Something that could change everything. You could feel it in every fan's voice, in every speculative tweet, in the way local radio hosts couldn't stop circling the same question. Would the Steelers make a move? And if they did, what kind of move would it be? Deadline day is always chaos in the NFL. It's the sport's own version of Wall Street's closing bell. But instead of traders shouting about stock prices, it's general managers haggling over contracts, coaches making last-minute pitches, and agents pushing for every possible dollar. Phones buzz nonstop, screens are lit up with draft pick charts, and somewhere in every building, someone is refreshing Twitter every 15 seconds just to make sure they're not missing the next bombshell. But inside the UPMC Rooney Sports Complex yesterday, it wasn't just chaos, it was urgency. Omar Khan, the Steelers' general manager, was a man in motion from the moment the office lights came on. 1 second, he was pacing with the phone pressed to his ear, voice low but sharp. The next, he was leaning over a conference table, scanning contract printouts while a staffer slid another folder his way. Coaches popped in and out, some with suggestions, others just looking for upgrades. Assistants rushed from one end of the building to the other, carrying upgrades, messages, and the kind of nervous energy that tells you everyone knows the stakes. The morning brought more frustration than celebration. Early in the day, a top wide receiver target was shipped off to the West Coast in a deal that Pittsburgh simply couldn't match without gutting their future draft capital. Not long after, talks with a veteran cornerback unraveled in the 11th. Our over-guaranteed money the Steelers weren't willing to risk given his recent injury history. Each near miss was a gut punch, not because the team was desperate to make a move, but because each failed deal was another reminder that opportunities on deadline day can vanish as fast as they appear. By mid-afternoon, the rumors started to shift. This wasn't coming from the big-name insiders with millions of followers. These were whispers, quiet, almost hesitant, from people who don't talk unless they have something real. They weren't naming names yet, but they were saying one thing that sent shivers through Steelers Nation. Pittsburgh was in talks, not with just any player, but with someone who could make an immediate impact, someone who could fill a gap that's been glaring all season. At first, it seemed impossible. This wasn't a player that had been linked to the Steelers in the past week, past month, or even the past season. In fact, he was widely expected to stay put, maybe even finish the year with his current team before hitting free agency. But the way the whispers described him made fans start to connect dots. A clutch performer, a postseason tested warrior, someone who'd been a thorn in the side of opposing teams for years. Was it offense, defense, special teams? No one knew. But the uncertainty only made the anticipation grow stronger. Social media went into detective mode. Twitter threads appeared, each one trying to piece together the mystery. Some swore it was a high-profile linebacker. Others were convinced it was a dynamic slot receiver. A few even floated the name of a big-name running back who'd been quietly unhappy with his role. Every cryptic emoji posted by an NFL reporter was overanalyzed like it was a clue in a crime novel. And through it all, the front office stayed silent. Not a single leak, not a single on-record comment, just that building tension, that gnawing feeling that something was about to happen. It could happen fast. Meanwhile, rival teams weren't sitting still. At least one AFC contender was said to have already contacted the players' camp, dangling both money and a clear path to the playoffs. Another team from the NFC, a legitimate Super Bowl contender, had reportedly asked about him too. Pittsburgh's margin for error was shrinking by the minute. If they wanted him, they'd have to move faster than they'd moved all season. Inside the Steelers building, the atmosphere was locked in. This wasn't just about filling a depth chart spot. This was about making a statement to the fans, to the league, to the players already in the locker room. This was about saying, the Pittsburgh Steelers are not here to coast through the season. They're here to fight for every inch, every yard, every win, and they're willing to make bold moves to do it. The final hours of deadline day always have a surreal quality. Outside, life goes on, people driving home from work, grabbing dinner, catching up on shows. But inside NFL offices, time compresses, every minute feels like 10. The phone never stops ringing, and every time it does, everyone in the room knows it could be the call that changes everything. By 7:30 p.m., things had reached a fever pitch. Reports from around the league showed deals falling apart at the last minute. One big name, defensive, and was nearly traded, only for talks to collapse over a single clause in the contract. Another blockbuster trade was supposedly done before being shot down by the league office due to paperwork errors. Deadline day is merciless like that. It builds you up, gets your heart racing, and then crushes you without warning. But for the Steelers, 8 p.m. brought a shift. It started small, a closed-door meeting between Khan, Coach Tomlin, and a handful of key decision-makers. Nobody outside that room knew exactly what was being said, but when the door opened, you could feel the change in the air, a smirk here, a purposeful stride there. Phones came out, calls were made, and assistants moved with a speed that said only one thing: they were closing in dot by now. The whispers had turned into a low roar among the few insiders who caught wind of it. The player was not just a fit. For Pittsburgh, he was exactly what they'd been missing: a rare blend of talent, grit, and the kind of mental toughness you can't coach. The kind of player who doesn't just play the game, he changes it. And yet, the name still wasn't public. Not yet. The Steelers were playing this close to the vest, perhaps to keep rival teams from swooping in with a last-second counteroffer. Every second counted, and every move was calculated. The minutes ticked away: 8:30, 8:45, 8:50. For fans at home, the wait was excruciating. For those inside the building, it was something else entirely, a controlled frenzy where every breath felt heavier, every glance toward the clock sharper. And then, it happened. The kind of moment you remember exactly where you were when you heard it. A phone call ended, a nod was exchanged, and in an instant, the room transformed. Smiles broke out. A fist hit the table in triumph. The deal was agreed in principle. All that remained was the paperwork. But in the NFL, paperwork is no formality, especially when the clock is winding down. Deals have fallen apart in those final steps more times than fans care to remember. One miscommunication, one missing signature, one delayed fax, and history changes. For Pittsburgh, the race wasn't over. The deal was done in spirit, but the deadline loomed like a shadow. And if they couldn't get every I dotted and T crossed before the clock hit zero, it wouldn't matter how perfectly the negotiations had gone. The player wouldn't be a Steeler. Not this year. The final minutes were chaos in motion. League officials were on standby. The player's agent was triple-checking every clause, and Khan was making sure nothing, absolutely nothing, could jeopardize what they just pulled off. Staffers ran documents between rooms, phones buzzed with confirmation calls, and somewhere in the middle of all that, the city of Pittsburgh was unknowingly holding its breath. And that's where we leave it for now, at the very edge of the deadline, the ink barely dry, the clock still ticking, and Steelers Nation waiting for the name that would send shockwaves through the NFL. Because this wasn't just a signing, this was a statement, and when the truth came out, it was going to shake the league. The clock was still ticking when the call came through, not a rumor, not an anonymous source, not one of those per my report tweets that pop up every few minutes on deadline day. This was the call, the one that changes everything, the one that sends a chill up your spine because you know you're about to say a sentence that will echo across every sports desk in America. Inside the UPMC Rooney Sports Complex, all eyes were on Omar Khan. His voice was steady, but the look in his eyes was the kind you only see when something has been fought for. At one against impossible odds, the words left his mouth with measured clarity. It's done. He's ours. The name was spoken in the room, and it was like a jolt of electricity. Coaches leaned back in their chairs, smiling in disbelief. Staffers exchanged quick nods, some shaking their heads as if to say, I can't believe we pulled it off. And then came the rush, the wave of realization that not only had the Steelers landed their man, they'd done it with the deadline breathing down their necks. This wasn't just a signing. It was a coup. The player in question, a proven difference maker, a veteran of high-pressure games, a man whose name alone could send defensive coordinators scrambling to rework their game plans, was now officially part of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it hadn't been easy. For days, His name wasn't even on the radar. Not in the local chatter, not in the insider circles, not even in the most optimistic fan wish lists. He was supposed to be untouchable, but Pittsburgh found a way in. How? That's where the story turns almost cinematic. Just 24 hours earlier, he'd been in talks with another AFC contender, a team sitting higher in the standings, a team with a bigger war chest of cap space to play with. They made their offer, and on paper, it was generous. Money, years, incentives, everything an agent could want. But here's where the twist comes in. The player turned it down, flat, no hesitation, because in his mind, there was only one place he wanted to be, and that place was Pittsburgh. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't even about the market. It was personal. He played in Pittsburgh before, not as a Steeler, but as an opponent, and every time, he walked away with the same impression. There was something different about this place. The fans weren't just fans, they were family. The stadium wasn't just a venue, it was a proving ground. And the black and gold weren't just colors, they were a promise that you'd be part of something bigger than yourself. So when the call from Omar Khan's office came, the player didn't just listen, he leaned in. He wanted details, yes, but more than that, he wanted to know the vision, the plan, the why. And when he heard it, when he heard Coach Tomlin's voice laying out exactly how he'd fit into the scheme, exactly what role he'd play, exactly how they saw him elevating not just the game, but the locker room, he was sold. The money, secondary, the opportunity, everything. But agreeing in principle was only the first hurdle. The real challenge was the clock. The NFL doesn't do almost. Either the deal isn't before the deadline, or it doesn't exist. And this one came dangerously close to vanishing. The paperwork had to pass through multiple hands: the Steelers' front office, the players' representation, the league office, and each step had the potential to trip over a technicality. At 11 minutes to deadline, there was a brief, stomach-dropping scare. One of the signatures was flagged for clarification. A minor formatting issue, but enough to stall the process. Phones lit up instantly. Voices got sharper. Somewhere in New York, an NFL official was waiting for the corrected page. And in Pittsburgh, a staffer was already sprinting to a scanner. 9 minutes 8, 7. In that moment, every person in the building was tuned to the same frequency. Urgency, no wasted words, no unnecessary movements. The corrected page went through, the approval came back, and at 5 minutes to deadline, the deal was officially stamped as complete. And then, it hit the news cycle. The push alerts came first. Breaking: Steelers acquire player name in deadline day stunner. Within seconds, it was everywhere. ESPN, NFL Network, social media feeds lighting up like fireworks. Fans who'd been pacing the living rooms all night suddenly had a reason to shout. Twitter exploded. Hashtags trended. Some fans were ecstatic, already picturing highlight reels. Others were cautiously optimistic, dissecting stats and injury history. But no one, not a single soul, was indifferent. This was the kind of move that forces you to take a position. You're either all in or waiting to be convinced, but you're talking about it. In the locker room, the news was met with a mix of excitement and respect. Veterans recognized the gravity of the move. The front office wasn't just filling a hole, they were sending a message: we believe in this season, we believe in you. Younger players saw it as a challenge, a reminder that the Steelers are constantly looking for ways to raise the bar. And for the man at the center of it all, this wasn't just another jersey to pull over his head. This was a fresh chapter, a chance to prove himself in a city that doesn't just watch football, it lives it. In his first unofficial remarks, he kept it simple. I came here to win. That's it. I know what this team stands for. I know what the fans expect, and I'm ready to give them everything I've got. You could feel it in those words. This wasn't lip service. This was commitment. Looking ahead, analysts are already reworking their predictions. Some say this could be the piece that solidifies the Steelers' playoff push. Others think it might even redefine the way they play down the stretch. The truth? Time will tell. But what's undeniable is that Pittsburgh just got more dangerous, more unpredictable. And in the NFL, unpredictability is a weapon. So here we are, Steelers Nation, on the other side of one of the most dramatic deadline days in recent memory. The deal is done. The ink is dry. And somewhere in the AFC, rival teams are already circling the date they have to face us. What do you think? Is this the masterstroke that takes us deeper into the postseason? Or is it a gamble that could go either way? One thing's for certain, we won't have to wait long to find out. And when that first snap comes with our newest Steeler on the field, the roar inside Acrisure Stadium will tell you everything you need to know. Because in Pittsburgh, we don't just celebrate wins, we celebrate moments. And this was one for the history books.